Hey guys, so in this video I'm going to tell all the details of everything leading up to HADASSAH's birth and just all the details that happened before, during pregnancy, even during Esther's birth that made it what it was. So if you guys are not wanting to watch that and you're wanting to watch just the labor and delivery part and see what it was that made me go into labor and how all that happened, then I'm going to put a time code up here and you can just go to that if you were wanting to watch that. Otherwise, I hope you guys enjoy watching the whole video. I originally was going to make this a video starting out talking about Esther's birth and telling that story. However, I'm not going to do that because I'm going to keep this video as positive as possible, and that experience was just not. When I got pregnant the second time, I knew what was going on, and I still wanted to have that, I guess, positive birth experience in some way, shape, or form, but I just didn't really know how. Like, I wanted to do that, but like, there was I had so much fear about everything. So anyways, at the same time as I found out I was pregnant, my best friend Savannah also found out she was pregnant, and so we started going through this whole journey together, which ended up being just one of the many awesome blessings in this pregnancy, because she started researching a lot of natural stuff, everything to do with birth. She recommended this book to me called Supernatural Childbirth that I ended up reading and really changed my pregnancy. I wish I would have read it a lot earlier, because this pregnancy, as awful as Esther's was with the nausea, was way worse. I ended up in the hospital 4 times getting fluids because I was so dehydrated, because I couldn't keep anything down, including water. I would just drink water and throw it right back up. It was awful. And I really didn't want it to be that way. I wanted to have that positive experience, but like I couldn't help the fact that I was that nauseous. But I read this book and it changed my perspective on birth and carrying a child and what that really means, and the blessing of it and the possibility of it. Not everybody can. I've been blessed to have, other than being sick, completely healthy pregnancies. So I was like, okay, I really want to get into this positive birth experience bandwagon. So there was another girl going to our church who, come to find out, they're my best friend Savannah, is a doula, which, if you don't know what a doula is, kind of like having a midwife, but they just can't actually like do any of the medical stuff. They just kind of are there for you emotionally and to help you navigate through and educate you on birth and carrying a child. So I started talking to her, and she really helped me understand everything that happens during birth, the positives and negatives of epidurals and the Pitocin and everything that they use to make your body go to labor. Just like the medical side of it and how it's really not that good, and if you can go natural, it's probably the best bet for you and the baby. Unless something is crazy wrong, you should probably try to go natural. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna try not to get an epidural this time. And for me, I have a generally high pain tolerance, but when it comes to things like in my body and going on inside of me and things like that, I kind of tend to freak out, and there's more to that too, but I'm not going into that. But I was scared to death of, oh, my back, it popped like 5 times. I was scared to death of it, but I was like, you know what, I'm gonna face my fears. I'm gonna believe and push aside my fear and push through it and just believe that I can have a positive birth experience. So I started going into everything, and in this book, it tells you to write down exactly what you want, to pray for exactly what you want, all this stuff. So I did that. I wrote down things that I wanted. Like, I wanted to have her between 38 and 39 weeks. I wanted to, there's a spider crawling on my phone. Yeah, anyways, I wanted the labor to only be 4 to 5 hours. I wanted to only have it in like 4 to 5 pushes, I think, or 3 to 4 pushes I think I had on there. And I didn't want to need a bilirubin like, because Esther did, and that was horrible. And then Oh, and then I just extra prayers on there, like the baby will be fully developed to be able to be delivered by 38 weeks and things like that. Well, when I reached, 37 weeks, I started doing all the things to try to make myself go into labor because I wanted to have her between 38 and 39. So I started walking and swimming like every day, and then just trying to be active to get my body moving. So when that wasn't happening, I started to get discouraged. I really wanted that to happen, but I wanted to go into labor naturally. So when it wasn't happening that I was going into labor between 38 and 39 weeks, the devil started to put stuff in my head, like, oh, God must not care about you. He's not answering your prayers for your specific birth. And just trying to make me scared, give me anxiety, make me depressed. And I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna go for this. So like, I started realizing, I was like, I need to like really hone in and pray right now. And at the time, whenever that happened, the Asbury revival was kind of just starting. And so I thought, you know what? I'm just gonna turn on K-Love and see what they're playing. So I turned on K-Love, and the girl was talking about the Asbury revival, and immediately I just started bawling. So then I was like, okay, I'm gonna put Esther down for her nap, and then I'm going to turn it on the live on my TV, and I'm gonna sit there and I'm gonna pray, and I'm just going to let that spirit that was in that revival just come into me. And I was like, I really just want to hone in on this, because I know God's using this revival to change people's lives and to really just reach people. And I was like, I want some of that. So I got Esther down for her nap, and then I went and I sat down on the ball, on my birthing ball in front of the TV, and I had a moment with God. See, at this point I was, I think, about 40 weeks. I think I was maybe 39 and a half, somewhere in there. And so I'm sitting on this ball and I start bawling. Like, God just starts wrecking me and bringing all these things to my mind, just breaking chains off of me from my past. There was I've had a lot of issues with things that were stuck in my head that I couldn't get out from religion, and it was playing into my birth and my pregnancies and my children and the way I saw raising my children. And I thought it was stuff that I just couldn't, I thought I was always going to deal with it because of my past and the trauma that I went through. And so as I sat there, God just started just pouring like this feeling on me of, you know, that's in the past. That feeling that you had growing up of so much control, like, it doesn't have to be that way, and to just let it go. And I started crying so hard that I actually threw up. And it was the most, and here we go, I'm gonna start crying because so much got lifted off of me in that moment. Like, there was so much stuff still with religion, and it's like, and over the past couple of years, I have worked through stuff and worked through stuff and worked through stuff and healed from stuff and healed from stuff. But in that moment, there was still like, it was like almost the rest of it, I feel like, which, you know, I guess you never really kind of know if it's all gone, but there was a big chunk of it, at least, that got pulled off of me at that point. And I was like, it doesn't have to be so, it's just between you and God. And I was just sitting there letting His Spirit just saturate me, and it was so peaceful and so just relieving. I don't know how else to describe it. And after that, I started praying for things like, God just really started healing me from a lot of things, just sitting there in front of my TV, and I don't even know how long I sat there. It was probably an hour to an hour and a half, to be honest, because I put her down probably at like 2, and I was still there when Cody got home from work at like 4. So maybe it was 2 hours, I don't know. I was there for a long time, and God was just really, really, really working on me. So at this point I was like, okay, this is why I hadn't given birth yet. Like, God knew that I was not ready. Like, he knew that there was still stuff that needed to be broken off of me, and that I needed to let go of in order to have this experience, because I was holding on to things that I thought was always going to affect me. And he was like, no, you have to let go of that if you want to be able to truly have this experience and not feel all those feelings from your past. So after that, I felt so much better. I had joy again. It was crazy. I was like, okay, God, I'm ready now. I'm ready to go into labor. I'm ready to have this child and birth her and to do this. And then it still was taking a couple of days, and I was like, well, you know, I don't know what's going on, but I'm just gonna keep praising. I'm just gonna keep worshiping. And see, I think that was on a Thursday night. I think it was a Thursday night that happened. So then Friday happened, and then Saturday night there was prayer at the church, and I went to that. And again, I get there and God just wrecks me. But not only that, he starts showing me that, like, the prayers that I had been praying were actually selfish, even though somebody else could pray them and they may not be selfish. Like, to have your child between 38 and 39 weeks is not necessarily a selfish prayer in itself, but the reason I was praying it was selfish was because I just didn't want to be pregnant for that long. And like everything else, like the one prayer that God did answer was that she did not need the bilirubin light. The rest of them about the laboring and the however many pushes, there wasn't that many pushes actually, I guess, really, by the time I started pushing, but still. Those were all really selfish prayers that I was actually praying. It had nothing to do with really wanting to have the supernatural childbirth. They were just that I didn't want to have to go through all that for that long and whatever. So God started showing me this, and then he just started showing me things to pray for, and changed my complete perspective and my prayers of what I was praying for in that childbirth. I started praying that she would come at the exact right time. I started praying that he would get all the glory through her birth, that people would be inspired by and like see God through her birth, and that was what the supernatural childbirth for me was going to be, was that it was going to be other people seeing what God can do for you and through you whenever you fully submit and surrender to him. And that night God wrecked me again. I sat there and I bawled my eyes out, and there was a lot more that God was showing me to pray for. It was like he healed my heart, but then he started showing me stuff to pray for, to mend things and other things in my life. And I don't want to go into all of that because some of it's kind of personal, but God really just entirely changed everything of what I was praying for her birth. Like, it was crazy. So not only do I believe that God did not let me go into labor that early because I wasn't ready in my heart and my mind and my soul, but also because by me wanting to go into birth that early, I started doing all the stretching, the swimming, and the walking to prepare my body for the birth. And I believe that I needed to start that early in order for it to go as well as it did, because I don't know how to say this without being too personal, but I don't stretch down there very well. Like with Esther, she was not that big and she still tore me. So this time I needed to start preparing my body earlier to be able to do that in order for her not to tear me and to be able to have that full experience of just having that natural childbirth and what that really feels like and what that's supposed to be. So yeah, all that happened. And then also I kept going to my favorite coffee lab in town, where I was talking to a guy who's super into natural childbirth also, who he helped his wife get through everything, and he's got the stories of what happened with that, and he was telling me all these things, and it was stuff, he was telling me stuff that I needed to hear too about it, and to give me the confidence in order to finish it out when I got in the middle, and I'll explain that when I get to that point in the birth. But so the actual birth, so in labor, so the actual labor and birth started on, technically I guess Wednesday night. I pumped on Wednesday night, made me start to have some pretty decent contractions that I hadn't had before. I've been having a lot of Braxton Hicks all the time, but not anything like that. I did that. Nothing really happened overnight. The next morning I had an OB appointment. I was like, I'm going to pump again and then go to my OB appointment. So I did. So I get there. She does another membrane sweep, which really starts me into having contractions again between the pumping and the membrane sweep. So we went and got coffee, talked to friends, went out to lunch. I was having contractions the whole time. And then we went to a friend's to get in the hot tub, and they started to die down. And that really discouraged me, because I thought my body is now going back into not being in labor again, because that had kind of happened a few times where I thought I was going and then nothing happened. And so I was getting kind of discouraged, because I really, really, really just did not want to be induced. And so I went to the hot tub. I kind of stopped having the contractions. I was like, let's go home and pump again. But by this time it was 5 o'clock at night on Thursday. So I was like, let's go home and pump again. So I went home, pumped. Within 2.5 minutes of starting to pump, I started having full-on labor contractions. They kept on going every 2.5 minutes while I was pumping. After I stopped, they went to about like 5, and they stayed there. They were about 5 to 7, at least 5 to 7, until I had her later on that night. So after that, we went to my doula. Her small group meets on Thursday night, so they were having just food and fellowship. So we went there. So I'm eating, and every 5 to 7 minutes, I'm having a contraction. I'm standing up, and I'm having contractions, and she's doing what she does to help me get through it. We get done eating. We end up going to one of the pastors at my church's house, because she has a big bathtub. It was easier for me to get in, because I'm tall. I don't fit in a regular bathtub very well. So we went there. I did that. I ended up laying on her couch from, let's see, I think we got there at like 8 or something, 8 p.m. And then we lay there until about 12, whenever I was having really, really intense contractions. They were starting to get very intense at that point. But I'm really, really thankful that I got to be there, because I got to be around 3 women who are Christians, powerful women of God that I love and look up to. So that was really a blessing to get to be there also, because it just kind of helped me stay in that mindset of, you've got this, lean into God, pray through it, and you can do it. So I kept having contractions. It kept getting more intense, more intense, more intense. Finally, like 12 comes around, and I'm like really, really yelling at this point. Like, they're intense. So I was like, okay, I think we need to go to the hospital. So we get to the hospital. I forgot to mention that morning she checked me. I was 4 centimeters dilated, which was at 9 o'clock in the morning was my appointment. So we get to the hospital. They check me. Yeah. And I was 6 centimeters. By the time they checked me, and then I was having contractions after that, the next few contractions were so intense that I started to want to give up. I just was like, you know what, I don't know if I can do this. I think I want an epidural. I think I want at least some pain medication. And they were like, well, they don't really like to give you regular pain medications after 5 centimeters. And you can get an epidural if you want. And I was like, I think I want one. This is really intense. I'm only 6 centimeters dilated. It took me this long to get this far, and now these contractions are like this. I was like, I don't know if I can take them for as long as it's gonna take me to get to 10. Like, I was like, this is a lot, and I was losing it. And the fear was starting to take over, and the fear was hitting me, and that was making them so much worse. At this point, my doula was like, look, listen, those contractions were really high, and she was like, those probably made you dilate a lot. Like, when you start having contractions that intense, that makes your body dilate more and faster. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to let them check me, see how dilated I am, go from there. They check me, sure enough, I'm 8 centimeters. I had dilated 2 centimeters in probably like a half an hour because of these really intense contractions. So then after that, I was like, okay, you know what? I think I can do this. So then my friend who I was talking about the coffee, I remember this thing he told me about his wife, how she was in labor, went into the hospital, and then she was dilating. She was really in labor. She was about to have the baby, and they convinced her to get an epidural, and it slowed down the dilating process by a lot. And it took hours after that for her to dilate fully and to actually have the baby, when they told her that in the end she was probably really close to having that baby at that time. So I was like, okay, you know what? I don't want that to happen. So screw it. I was like, I'm not gonna get the epidural. I'm just gonna deal with this pain, and I'm gonna pray through it, and I'm gonna take it. So I did. I just started screaming and yelling and letting it out, because I was like, I'm gonna do this. I'm not gonna give up at this point. I've made it this far. Like, I was like, I'm proud of myself. Like, it's been hours that I've been like in this labor, and I've made it this far. Now I'm 8 centimeters. Like, am I really gonna give up right now and get this epidural and like slow down the whole process and give up my whole dream of having this happen? Like, am I really gonna do this? And I was like, no, I'm not. So I started pushing through it. I started just screaming. And I started screaming Jesus while I was having contractions. I'm sure the whole floor heard the name Jesus being screamed out through that place. And then in between contractions, I would just breathe, and I started quoting, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I just started quoting it over and over and over. And like, I could feel the peace of God, like literally flood over me as I said that. And it made everything like, I was like, I can do this. I can do this now. Like, this is gonna happen. And so every time that a contraction would come again, I would just start screaming Jesus, like screaming Jesus, like, I can do this. Like, I'm not gonna give up. I've wanted this whole time, and I'm just gonna give up because now it hurts. Like, no, I'm not. And so I just kept doing that. I kept doing that. I kept doing that. Every time I had a contraction, they were getting worse. They were getting worse. But I just screamed, and I screamed Jesus. Like, I can't even tell you, like, what, yeah. So, the next step was my water breaking, and it hadn't broken yet. So that was the one thing they did for me, was break my water, but I had absolutely no medications. So the next thing, the doctor comes in, so they checked me again. I was 9 centimeters. They broke my water. Then I wanted to get up because I was sitting on my butt on the bed, and that's really not a good position to be in. It actually hurts worse. So I got up, got on the floor. That wasn't working. That hurt really bad too. So then I was like, my doula was like, do you want to get on hands and knees on the bed? And I was like, yeah, actually, because that was another thing that I really wanted to do, was give birth on hands and knees, because then you have gravity on your side. That's another reason I didn't want an epidural, because then you can do that, and then you have gravity on your side, and it actually happens a lot faster, and it's a lot easier to push in that position also. So then I got up on the bed, got on hands and knees, had my hands up at the top of the bed. They're at the top of the bed, sitting up, and my hands were up on the top, and I was holding my doula's hands, and then the contractions were getting to pushing contractions, and they hurt so bad, and I was just sitting there screaming, Jesus, 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 through my contractions. And then I would just breathe, calm down, and just take advantage of that break that I had, and just quote, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Like, that scripture is like literally got me through that birth. Woo. Anyway, so next thing I know, they start telling me to push. So my doula told me when you don't get an epidural, you start having pushing contractions, but they don't make you push, because when you don't get an epidural, you're gonna get tired out really fast because you're feeling everything. So they will let you just have the pushing contractions up until about 20 minutes, and then they will actually let you start pushing, because it's gonna come out faster because you can actually feel what's going on. Which, yeah. So finally they told me, okay, then this next one, when you have the contraction, we want you to just don't breathe out, breathe in, hold your breath, and bear down. So I'm like, okay. So I breathe in, I start to bear down. At this point, I'm learning how to push, to be honest, because with the first one, I couldn't feel what I was doing, so I didn't know. So I pushed, I bared down until I figured out what I was doing, and to my amazement, when I pushed and bared down as hard as I possibly could, the pain all completely went away. And I was like, oh, this is crazy, because my body is pushing. I'm pushing with it, therefore the pain is just going away, because I'm becoming one with my, I don't know how to explain it, but like, your body is pushing, you just push with it, and that pain goes away because you are going with it. It's hard to explain, but it was the craziest thing I've ever explained or ever experienced. So I'm pushing, and they would count to 10. 1, 2, 3, and I would push the whole time until they got to 10. Well, it got to the point where when I realized the pain would come back whenever I breathed between pushing, that I didn't want to, and so she would get to like 14, and my doula would be like, breathe. So I'd be like, and then I would go again, because I didn't want to breathe, because the pain when I would let go and breathe and start to between and push again, the pain in between was so bad, and I didn't want to feel it. So I would just like push as hard as I could for as long as I could, and they were like, you have to breathe and push again. So we got that going, and I think I only pushed maybe 10 times, because, well, 10 contractions, which was about 3 times of pushing each time. But because, yeah, they had made me wait, and so then she started coming down, and I could feel her coming down, which was crazy too. I did not feel that the first time. So they keep telling me to do this. It gets to the point where finally, like, I've pushed a bunch of times, and all this time, honestly, I was thinking in my head, what in the world did I do to myself? What have I got myself into? But then I was like, you know what? No, I just had to keep going back to Jesus. I can do this because you give me the strength. Like, I'm gonna make it through this. So then it gets down to, I pushed the 3 times during a contraction, and then it let up, and I let go, and I felt her go back up a little bit, and I was like, oh no. I am not doing all this pushing for that to happen. She's right there, I can feel it. I'm giving it everything I have. So in the next contraction, I probably went to 14 all 3 times. She's counting to 10, and I'm like continuing to push, and then I just took a breath really fast. Oh my gosh. So literally I was about to get to the best part, and my phone died. Anyways, they are counting to 10, and I'm just going to like 14, like every time. And I push, and I feel her come down to like the very bottom. And I'm like, no, she's coming out. And so I breathe again, and I just bear down and push with everything I have, and I feel like her head like come out, and then like her shoulders start to get there, and then I like bear down and I just push again, and she just comes out the rest of the way. And I couldn't believe it. Like in that moment, right after I felt her come out, I was like, oh my gosh, like I did it. I did it. Like, I can't believe I just did it. Like, she's out. I didn't have an epidural. I wasn't induced. I went into labor all on my own, and she's here. And I was just sitting there still on my hands and knees, just taking it all in, and I'm just crying, and I turn around and look, and I see her in the doctor's arms, and I just keep crying. And then they were like, "Do you want to turn around and meet your daughter?" And I'm like, yes. And so then I just turn around and sit down, and they hand her to me, and I just like lost it. I was like, I can't believe I just pushed this beautiful, perfect, tiny little girl out of me, and I did it all naturally, and I had nothing. And like, it was crazy. It was like the best feeling. I was like, I felt like I conquered the whole entire world in that moment. Like, I never in my entire life thought I would ever push a baby out of me without an epidural. Like, that is just crazy. Like, I can't believe I did it. Like, when I think about it, like, it's just crazy. But then, like, it was the most beautiful thing I have ever experienced. And then after that, like, the recovery is insane. Like, you literally recover so much faster because you didn't have any medications to mess you up. And your body can feel itself and what it's doing, and it knows what to do. And so it just, the amount of pain and complications that I had after having Esther compared to HADASSAH was like astronomical. Like, I mean, like, I didn't have anything crazy with Esther, but I mean, I had an epidural, so it was hard for me to get up and walk. It had worn off mostly by the time I did finally have her, so I could get up pretty quickly. But I mean, it still hurt really bad. My, not to be again too graphic, but my urethra hurt extremely bad because they, instead of cathing you, because you can't feel, so you don't know when you have to pee, so they have to cath you. Well, instead of cathing me and leaving it in until I was about to give birth, they just in and out cathed me every 2 hours, which, by the way, irritates your urethra really bad. So it hurt to pee for like 2 weeks after I had Esther. Like, literally the first time I peed, it didn't even hurt this time. She was like, it might burn. I was like, okay. So then it took me a little bit because I was kind of scared of it burning, but then once I relaxed and peed, it didn't even hurt. And I was like, this is amazing. Like, sucks that happened the first time, but this is amazing. And it was just crazy. Like, everything was so much easier. I could get up and walk. Like, yeah, sure, I hurt a little bit, but again, your body goes back so fast when it knows what it's doing, and it can feel like, I know everybody can't do that, but I'm trying to tell you, if you want to and you put your mind to it, you can do a lot more than you think you can. I would have never in a million years ever thought I would have given birth without an epidural, like, literally. And for those who know me, you know that's true. And I overcame and conquered so much in the last 2 weeks. Not even that, like, week before her birth, literally. Well, it was a week, because whenever I had that moment in my living room, I'm pretty sure that was actually Friday, because it was the next night that was Saturday when I had the second encounter at church, at prayer. So yeah. And then, because it was the next Friday that I was 41 weeks, which was the day that I gave birth. That's crazy. Like, God literally changed so much about me and my perspective and my perspective on birth and life entirely in that week before I gave birth. Like, it's just crazy. He gave me a whole new perspective on her in general, even how I saw her, what I felt like, how I perceived having a newborn. Like, with Esther, I hate to say it, but like, I really did not enjoy the newborn stage. I wasn't really ready for a baby. I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't exactly the type of person that always wanted a baby, but this time, like, God gave me this just understanding, and to just, that's why when she came out, I was like, what I just did is amazing. Like, it really hit me from a whole new perspective, and it was the most beautiful thing I have ever experienced. And that's the truth. I firmly believe that supernatural childbirth does not have to be the pain-free childbirth and all that. Like, it can be, if that's God's plan for you. But for me, the supernatural part of that childbirth was believing that I could do it and that God could help me through it and that I was capable if I just trusted him, believed on him, overcame my fear and kept praying through it. That was the supernatural part for me. That was truly supernatural. Like, like the amount of fear that I had the first time, and fear makes everything worse. Fear makes pain worse, it makes waiting worse, it makes time go by even harder to deal with. Like, fear is just, it's of the devil. So you have to give all those fears over to God and just trust and believe him that he can help you, that he can help you make it through whatever it is you're going through. And I'm telling you, he will. He will come through. He'll be there for you. Also, I forgot to say this. After I got done and I had her and I was just sitting there holding her in the bed and everything had calmed down and I was just enjoying holding her, and Cody was sitting there just talking with me and looking at her and just enjoying her too. And Charity, my doula, had sat on a chair, was about to fall asleep, but then she looked up at me and she goes, God just told me that there were angels in the room the whole time. And I forgot to mention that that was one thing that I prayed for. Literally the night, Saturday night while I was at prayer, God told me to pray that there would be angels in the room. And I started praying. I said, whatever room I'm going to be in, I pray that you would just go ahead right now and put them in there and start preparing the room and the atmosphere in there. And that was almost an entire week before I had her. And then after that, she said, God just told me that there were angels in the room everywhere in here during the birth. And I was like, God, you're so good. Like, he answered pretty much like all the prayers that he had changed my birth prayers to. Like, he's just so good. Like, I don't even know, like, how did it, he's like, this whole experience has changed my perspective on life. Honestly, it has built my faith, it has crushed fears, it has healed wounds, it has given me like hope for the future in multiple different areas of my life. Like, it was crazy, it was awesome, and it was totally God-filled. And I really, really, really hope that this story can be an inspiration and help someone who needs it, because that's what God wants. That is the supernatural childbirth. That is God getting the glory through hard times, through whatever you're going through. That's what it is. So, I hope you guys enjoyed hearing this story. Thanks for listening. I'm going to post pictures of birth and after birth and everything that happened at the end of this video. So if you want to see those are pretty awesome too. And yeah, thanks for watching. I will see you guys in the next video.